here at TCTV, TC Media in Olympia, and have a wonderful guest, actually co-host, if you would, Donna Seebo.
Thank you. Thank you.
And today we're going to talk about mental health, and it's kind of for all ages, in a lot of different aspects of that, I'm sure, as we kind of journey through this. But before we do that, maybe just a little bit of your background.
Oh, of course. Well, my background is a very eclectic one in that I became aware of my psychic intuitive abilities. I call myself a mental practitioner. I use it as a tool to help other people, but I'm also an award-winning author. I've written children's books, and I have a couple of nonfiction items as well. And people can go to my website and they can find out more about that. But I also work as a teacher and as a counselor, and this is something that has been a very significant part of my life. Because when you're in the work of mind, when you are studying it, when you're utilizing it, utilizing your intuitive factors, there's a great deal of discipline that goes along with that. And that's not something that people really look at, or they understand. If they hear the term psychic, one expects you to look like something from, well, maybe outer space, I don't know. But you're not supposed to be well-groomed, attractive.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got stories I could share that are just really, to me, hilarious, even when I think about them. It's interesting how we compartmentalize our thinking without understanding what really goes behind it. But being a teacher and a counselor, and also as a writer, and I've done programs, I've done seminars, I've done so many things in my life. And then, of course, being a broadcaster, and both in radio and television. So it has been, you might say, like a bouillabaisse of various experiences with all kinds of spices, if you will. Some of them nice, some a little bit too hot to handle. But it's one of those things that I really am very grateful to have journeyed as I have in such a different way. But I made the choices, and many times we don't realize how significant our choices are, and that we do have more choices available to us than we recognize. But we also have to take a risk. We also have to step out into territories that maybe we've seen other people fail at, and yet we find we can do something that surpasses maybe what would have been their wildest expectation. So that's a little bit of background in a sort of a short summary. Mm-hmm. But I really find that life is truly an adventure. And every day you never know what gifts you're going to be given. It's fascinating to me. And it could be something simply very, very simple, like maybe a smile or a greeting from someone, but there can also be very, very rich in other ways, with new opportunities, exploring new modalities, and finding out about new parts of yourself that you never knew existed. I think life is amazing.
It certainly has been, hasn't it?
Yes.
And what perspective comes to mind, attitude comes to mind of how we choose to take on each day. And just what you're saying is, I'm open. Let's just see what the day has to offer, what's going to come my way, what the exchanges are going to be, all of those wonderful things. And sounds like you certainly have. It's that curiosity too of. So what's in store today?
What's in store today? I think that that's a very individual experience, because I can look back and I can think about what I've gone through in my life. And when I was growing up, my world was the size of a postage stamp. And I think a lot of people could relate to that. Mm-hmm. You know, your world is the family, the environment you're in. It might be nice, it might be horrifically horrible. But regardless, that's all you know. And then to break out of that, to break out of the modalities, to question, to wonder, is there something else? Now, education is very important. I think education, though, can come in many different formats. It can come from working experience. It can come from meeting new people. It can come from moving into a new locale. I mean, there's an infinite amount of ways that it can approach your life. And it's when you're willing to say, and you use the word curious, I wonder. Now, that's gotten me into trouble a few times. But I'll tell you what, I'm grateful for that. Because it made me aware in sort of a safe way, but not necessarily a safe way. Mm-hmm. It made me aware that I had to be a better observer than what I was. Mm-hmm. And when I became really aware of how little I knew, and I can even attest to that today, when I think of how little any one of us can know about anything, it is exciting. Now, when I was younger, I thought that was terrible. But it isn't. Not at all. Because what you learn, if you're wise, what you learn is your mistakes make you aware of what you don't want, what you don't like. When you have failures, you then have the opportunity to examine, is it really a failure or is it a learning experience? How can you benefit from this? How can you take that you consider a failure and turn it into something that's going to be a leverage for you to move forward?
Absolutely.
I tell so many people, I've made so many mistakes in my life, it's a belly band around this planet. I mean, really. We have to be honest about what we are aware of, but there are some things I do know for certain. And life is for the living. Life is for the living. And you can moan and groan over whatever you want to moan and groan over, but the truth is, life demands action. Life demands participation. And so often we're not willing to do that, then life usually gives us a good swift kick where we may or may not have a choice. And hey, I'm a human being just like everybody else, and I get lazy and I get complacent, and then all of a sudden something comes along and you go, uh-oh, here I go again. And that's what you do. Mm-hmm. But how do you want it to be? Do you want it to be a roller coaster, or do you want to be in a putt-putt like a garage, like a golf cart? How do you want it to go? Sometimes, again, you don't have a choice, but other times you do. And so I think that's important. Differentiating
where to go, following your own instinct, would you say? Of which way to go with it?
Well, my instinct, lots of times my instinct got me into trouble. But part of it is that curiosity. Mm-hmm. Part of it is the curiosity. But I remember, because I started working when I was 17 years old, and I worked for a major company, and I can remember being talked to by one of my supervisors. And all of my supervisors at this particular job were women. And they came to me and they said, Donna, we would like to train you for being a supervisor. Well, I got news for you. When you're 17 years old, you're brain dead. I mean, you don't even think it. And I said, what? Are you serious? Because all I saw in my small, tiny little world was, why in the heck do I want to be a supervisor? Do you know how they talk about you behind your back? Mm-hmm. I mean, really? At 17, I was not in any way, shape, or form ready for that. However, they saw something in me I could not see in myself. And I was only 17. So I look back on that now, and every once in a while, maybe for about 5 seconds, I'll think about it and go, what would have happened if I had become a supervisor? Nah, I wouldn't have made a good supervisor at 17 years of age. I did not know enough. I wasn't wise enough. I could have learned all the different protocols, but I didn't know life at all. Well, within 2 years, I got quite a bit. And then I can remember looking for another job because I realized it was time to grow again. And like so many young people, you say, gee, I've got to pay the bills and all of that. And I remember going out and finding opportunities. But honestly, I didn't know what I could ask for. So I ended up going to work for a police department. Somebody said, oh, yeah, they have jobs for women. Oh, really? They do? Okay, that's great. Let me see. Well, I took the exam, and I was actually offered a job with 2 different police departments. One was LAPD, and the other one was Inglewood PD. And I chose Inglewood PD. This is in California. And I chose Inglewood PD because it was closer to home, and I didn't have to drive so far. And they had a terrible traffic problem down there then. I mean, it was just really, really bad. Anyway, that's what I did. Now, I had no idea what I was getting into. I was in the communications division. At that time, it was a little tiny area. All of the women that had been hired were hired because of their intelligence. You had to pass the test, but you had to do it. I wasn't with them for that long. I think it was a little bit over a year. I was in the wrong place. And again, I was too young. But I learned a lot while I was there. I learned a lot from the officers that I came in contact with. I had the inside track on many things. And I had no idea it would serve me later on. As a mature woman, I had no idea that experience would serve me. So then I went from there, and then I went into something else. I was in insurance, then in another arena. Everything I ended up, though, going into, every single aspect was related to communication. Every single environment I found myself in, all, when I connect the dots, all related to communication.
And what does that allow us?
And that evolved me into broadcasting. But actually, it's the psychic development side of me I didn't even know that I had. And the woman that was my mentor, who became my mentor, she was a very, very gifted woman. She also was very skilled with astrology. And she recognized in me my abilities. And she said, this is what you're going to be doing. I said, you're nuts. I mean, you got to be kidding me. There's no way I'm going to do this. She said, no, you understand everything. And I said, I don't understand anything. What are you talking about? But you know, it's interesting. You can look at people, and I'm sure you've done the same thing. You've met someone and you go, wow, that person would really do well in this career environment or that career environment. And you recognize those things about people. And that can happen even with a toddler. I mean, you can see little ones and you know exactly where their temperament, everything, and you go, okay, you'd be great in the military. You really should do X, Y, Z. You should go out and be an archaeologist, or you should go and be a plumber, a mechanic, because so often we don't focus on our strengths. And that is something that when I got into metaphysics and I got into the development of psychic ability, that I realized that was a very valuable tool. And that evolved me into the counseling and into becoming a minister and working with the public on an entirely different level. And that ended up leading me into my very first media experience, which was television. It was television. I was invited by a couple of women who had a talk show. This was in San Jose, California. And they said, Donna, would you demonstrate your skills? I said, sure, I'd be happy to. And what we did, she said, well, can you talk to strangers on the phone? I said, sure. I said, I don't care. And I did that, and those phone lines just rang and rang and rang. And they said, "You're good at this." And I said, "I am? Okay, that's nice to know." So here we go with this. So so many years later, here I am, and I was doing television programming in the 90s. I was doing broadcasting, being a guest on shows here in Olympia, in Canada. I've done it in Spain. I've done it in different parts of the U.S. And it is just, it's so comfortable. But what I was able to do was to show people there's no gimmicks to the powers of the mind, and it is a tool that you can use for the betterment of life, or if you want, you can go the other way.
Your choice.
Yes. Yes, and I choose to empower people. That's my positioning.
So this is the journey that has allowed you to kind of see some of those things, right? The things you've collected along the ways, the experiences that you've had that, well, here it is where now you can share that, or you've been doing that all along, was sharing that with someone
Yes.
else. And you're also talking about something that somewhere in there of kind of doubting what other people were seeing in you.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Think of our young people today. You have young people today, and I know I get these documented things and people writing all these books about mental health, and they're going on and on. In fact, I've actually reached a point where I'm very selective when it comes to this, because I do not choose to be, what do I want to say, a doomsdayer. The power of the mind is especially important to understand. Young people are not going to be able to understand this to the degree that a mature person can. And just recent information that came out about COVID, and of course there's so many things that come out about COVID that you wonder where they're getting their stats from. But one of the significant reports that I found was that the senior population didn't have the level of depression like the younger population did. Now, why is that?
Good question.
Why is that? The reason is that the mature population has probably gone through all kinds of adversity. You talk with people like I have that are in their 90s, that served in the Second World War. Their families went through depressions. They've had death if they're in the military. They have been a part of multiple wars. I've interviewed veterans that have been involved in World War II. They were involved in the Korean War. They were involved in Vietnam. They maybe even were serving as an advisor in some capacity. You know, when you think of the Middle East, we've got this. There's a war going on somewhere. So you have this, but there's all kinds of wars in life that people go through. There's all kinds of tragedies. So the reason that they didn't have the extreme depression is the older individual is saying, well, I guess this is what we have to do, because they went through diphtheria, they went through typhoid, they've got, all kinds of diseases that still are around today.
Yes.
Very much around today. And in our world at this time, when we think about life expectancy increasing dramatically, when we think about the medical knowledge that we have acquired and are continuing to acquire at a phenomenal rate, it's not perfect, believe me, but the thing is, we have more than our ancestors had. And we're coming to understand things in a much different way. And COVID pushed us ahead about 10 years, as far as I'm concerned, on so many levels. But the younger generation has often been fed and insulated from the concept of actual life. Now, that's not with all of them. I've interviewed a number of young people that have seen tragedy, that have seen death, that have had physical illnesses, but the majority of young people live in a very tiny world. And I think that's with every generation. But in previous generations, it was encouraged. You were not considered a child once you entered into puberty. You were considered a young adult. You had to be responsible. You had to be able to contribute to your family's well-being. You know, I think of the different people I've interviewed where they didn't, they talk about their family members that didn't go past the 3rd grade in education, boys and girls both, because they had to work on the family farm. It wasn't that long ago that 90% of the American population, it was an agrarian population. We have 1 to 2% of that that's agrarian today because of mechanization.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is this instantaneous gratification that is expected. We're supposed to have everything put together immediately. If there's a challenge, well, is there a pill that I can take that can fix it? We have ended up with a critical situation on a medical level, both with the young as well as the mature individuals, with opioids. And a young person will say, I can't take the stress. We'll go and take a walk, for heaven's sakes, or be involved in something. And mental illness, I just had a report given to me recently that there are so many people in the counseling arena that really feel a lot of the mental illness that younger people are experiencing is because of medications.
Too free with that to dispense it, unfortunately.
It's medications.
Yeah.
And what you're dealing with is chemistry. You're dealing with chemistry. No one has the capacity at this time, which I think is going to change, but at this time, there is no way of evaluating the chemical responses that you are going to be experiencing. I love the ads on television, you know, for pharmaceuticals. They give this stuff, and at the end, you've got a minute and a half of all the things that could go
Side
wrong
effects,
with you.
yeah.
Okay. So I just get on that platform and I say, how do you know? If you're taking medications, if you're a young person and an older person, it doesn't make any difference. How does it affect you? What is the chemical analysis? What is going to balance with your body? How are your genetics going to work with it? Do you need a drop? Do you need a bucket load? Everybody's different.
Absolutely.
And our chemistry is always changing. And it can change with our emotions as well. So we're a very complex system. This body of ours is phenomenal at what it's able to do. But when we don't know how to work with it, and that's something I give Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine a big pat on the back, because they have centuries of research. And I think, fortunately, in America, we are coming to understand how we can blend the two. It's not an either or. And I've had physicians through the years tell me, don't bother with nutrition. I'm not interested in that. Doesn't make any difference. Vitamin supplements are a waste of time. It's just going down the toilet. Well, I interviewed Jack LaLanne before he died, and he said he didn't care what anybody's opinion was. He lived to be 95, and it was because he had to have a heart surgery that he died. He wore the poor heart out. But that man left a huge legacy. Of course, I don't agree with his attitude of if it tastes good, spit it out. I'm sorry, I just can't go along with that one. But that was his adage. He said that on my show more than once. If it tastes good, spit it out. In other words, you're not supposed to enjoy your food. This is the way it is. And I said, that's not going to work.
One of the chinks in his armor.
Well, he enjoyed getting the chinks. That's okay. Gave him a platform to argue on. But the man was right. He was right about so many things. He was right about exercise. And I remember him talking about how he hated exercise. Now, that coming out of Jack LaLanne's mouth was something else. But he did. But he said, I do it because I know I'm able to function and I'm able to keep my mobility and I'm able to do these things. So in his 90s, he was walking the walk. Not just talking the talk, but he was walking the walk. So you have these things, and all of us are going to have an expiration date. But going back to the mental area, then how is it that our mind-body-spirit connection works? Mental illness is a very complex something. And it involves the chemistry of the body, as well as the emotions, the spiritual side of life, and it's so much more. We're not a one-size-fits-all.
No.
And the younger generation are having a challenge with that. Because according to everything they watch on TV and what they're getting in school, well, we're not supposed to go through this stuff.
Guess what?
Mm-hmm. Guess what? It's going to hit them one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're fortunate, they will have some older individuals around them that will make them aware. They're going to survive it. But when you mix the drugs in, you've got a chemistry alteration in the brain that's occurring. And from what I've heard from reliable reports, males especially don't develop very much in the brain department until they're about 30. So I don't know how true that is.
Well, the frontal lobe,
I guess that's what it is. I
so
don't
we
know.
make decisions and that sort of thing in your mid-20s.
Yeah. It just doesn't come in. And with girls, it's a little bit different, but it's the
A
same
little sooner.
thing.
Yeah, but still, yeah.
It's still the same thing. And we're seeing the same challenge with girls as we're seeing with the boys. But, I mean, let's face it. When in 1980 a law was passed that kids could not work in the farm fields here in Washington, I remember hearing that and I said, who decided to put that together? Because kids were making money so they could go to school, so they could buy their supplies. Their families were not wealthy. And it got them outside. Now guess what we're telling them? Get them outside. Everybody, staying inside, not being outside. The kids are afraid to get dirty. They're not supposed to get dirty. No. It's okay. It's okay.
It's vital.
It is.
It's vital.
It's vital to them.
Yes.
For the health, but mentally, physically, emotionally. So kids need to be engaged. They need to be engaged, and they need to know that there are going to be challenges in life.
You can count on that.
Yeah, people are going to die. People are going to get sick. They might get sick. Then it's the poor me. Gee, why does this happen to me? Well, that's part of what your immune system depends upon, is you're getting sick once in a while so it can battle what it needs to battle. It's amazing. It really is. But I think with mental health, the best thing is that with young people, people of any age, be engaged in something. Get out of your pity pot and really move forward. Stop the whining, stop the complaining, just, go for it. And I think the ROTC programs for young people in schools is great. I really think it's great because it gives them an adult perspective of many things. That's what the military did when it was mandatory. It did it for a lot of young people. It made a difference, males and females. And I know of many individuals I've talked with, and they've said it made all the difference in the world to them. Made all the difference in the world. But not everybody's going to want to go that route.
And that's okay,
And
isn't
that
it?
is perfectly fine. But go get a job. Mow lawns. Do something. Get out of the all it's about you.
And
It's
out of
not
the
all
house.
about you.
Really?
No,
yes.
no. And I really think something, well, actually, a relative of mine, he was in a lot of senior citizen facilities. He was on a board that when he became a part of it, they were visiting. This is in Texas. And they were visiting all kinds of facilities. He said it was appalling what he saw. And what he did, he put together a program through a school. And he got in touch with the teachers at the school and talked with them and said, I would like for your students to come out and to go to this home, and they will be assigned to an elderly person, and they are then to talk to them, to find out about them, and then they're to rewrite a report on that person. well, these kids had never been around anybody, that was, over 35 or 40? And they go in and they see the facility and they've got to talk to someone and they have to communicate with them, and this is for a report at school. What came out of that was amazing. These young kids said, oh, this was, I learned about all kinds of things. And then they shared it. They wrote the reports. He was blown away by what these kids were able to absorb.
When presented with the opportunity.
That's right. And this is something that I think the isolation of generations produces so many problems. Because how are you going to know how to work with adulthood if you're not around older people? And I'm not saying all older people are saints. Forget about that one. They're far from it. I mean, you're going to find them very, very honoring many times, and they might even be sarcastic. That older person might be in a great deal of pain, and they're having to talk with a young squirt in front of them. They're saying, really? Okay, and their patience level is about like that. So they go, but they're interested in enough. And it's that cross communication.
Fortunately, yes.
So that was an experiment that he did, but he said he saw the benefit all the way around, both for those persons that were the elders, as well as for the young ones that were there.
Two-way street, right? Both benefit.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And the elders enjoyed having the young ones because they have all this energy and, oh, gee whiz, can I eat your cookie or whatever? And they got out of their stuck in the mud environment. Think about it.
Yeah.
Do you know in Japan, they are working on an experiment of having not just communities of people, but they want to integrate the younger people with the older people. And this is something that they are finding is going to be very significant. And it just fascinates me how quickly and how easily we want to isolate communities. Look at how long it took before you could have a dog or a llama or a kitty or a ferret go into a senior citizen facility, and the cats, and look at the difference it made with those people. They came alive.
Pet therapy, yeah.
It really is incredible. Why? Because it's a living essence of life. And they get to pet it or cuddle it or talk to it. It is so important. And having young people around, lots of times the older people will be very, very patient with the younger ones when they're trying to learn something.
Nice spark, too, isn't it,
Yeah.
for that? Both sides, but
sides.
especially for the...
So when it comes to mental illness, there's so many factors to that. It's not just one level. And you can have someone that's perfectly healthy, and yet they are on 10 different medications. You go, why?
So convenient, isn't it, unfortunately?
Yeah, and it dumbs them down.
Yeah.
It takes away their elasticity mentally.
Because you're in this zone that you're so oblivious, unfortunately. I've seen that happen so many times, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a joke. It's a very serious thing. So it's a composite that creates the difficulty.
Something I was curious about, too, worked as a clinician with young people with a variety of mental health issues, diagnoses. So anxiety, depression, whatever it might be. And almost always there was medication prescribed. And for us, I'm not a doctor. I can't prescribe. So we're going to have to come up with some other ways of working through those symptoms that you're having. And it's not going to be, I'm not going to tell you don't take your medication because that's not my spot, not my place, but how else can we do this? And just really opening, you just alluded to something about taking pets into, first of all, just going in to see senior citizens, that's quite a step for a young person, isn't it? And again, that two-way street. But like you say, there's so many other ways of approaching mental health, wellness, than let's medicate.
I like art therapy.
Tremendous, isn't
I
it?
think that you can find out so much about a person with the art therapy, and it works with the subconscious as well as the conscious mind, and it opens up windows in a person that I think it's phenomenal. And you don't tell them what to do or what to draw or anything else. Just let them do it. I was in a class, a friend of mine who had done some art therapy classes. She wanted to do an experiment. So there were a bunch of us that said, okay, we'll come to your class. I was fascinated with what I saw. Because nobody has to be an artist. You just, put it out, lay out the colors. And it doesn't take long. You can see into that other person so well.
Amazing, isn't it?
It is wonderful. And music. Music and dance.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. So there's so many options that can be looked at. And I think many times we make the mistake of thinking that it is the medicine, when actually maybe what we need to do is understand there might be exercises that can be done either in sports or, doing something specifically, but art therapy or music, movement, because all of that has an effect on the brain. And the brain is plastic. It's not what was promoted for so many hundreds of years that you're brain dead after a certain period.
Really? Yeah.
I mean, really. The body is constantly recycling. I just think we live, again, in a very exciting time because of what we were finding that we thought was limiting before, and people reinvent themselves. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
And you mentioned something with art therapy. I can recall, just with youngsters, asking them to just do a drawing. Like you said, usually it's whatever you want to draw, but the members of your family. It was always kind of interesting to see. You mentioned colors, but also who's who in the family from their perspective. Somebody's pretty big. And it's kind of like this power thing sometimes, but what you see and what you learn about, we don't have to talk so much about it first. But right here, once that drawing is done or in the process of, what we're able to discuss then and really tell me more about what's going on here anyway. But just tremendous, isn't it?
Oh, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And those subtle things that'll come out. Maybe the child will, or an adult, will have a drawing of a specific symbol or a figure or a design. And you go, oh, that's amazing. What did you do there? That's incredible. I was just in awe of what came out in this group. And I thought, this is a very useful tool. And so many people, just like yourself, that I've known that have been in counseling or in therapy work of one kind or another, they often have expressed having knowledge in different modalities enables them to work more effectively with people. And with kids especially.
Yes.
I mean,
it's
they'll
not
just
one
say,
size fits all, is it?
Okay, no, it's wonderful. They need structure. And I think that is often what is missing in the lives of many people, is a form of structure. And people often look at that word and say, no, that's too limiting. But all structure means is that you give support to what it is you want. Any discipline that you learn has to have a structure first.
Yeah, it's not going to
We
happen.
cannot stand and use our bodies unless the structure is in place the way it's supposed to be.
And kids want that.
They
may
really
not,
do.
the behaviors may not show that sometimes, but they really do want that structure, the organization, the methodology of whatever it is, right? Because then it's a bit more concrete than anything goes.
Well, I think they feel safe. They feel safe.
Yeah,
And we adults need to realize that that's something we like too.
definitely.
We like to. If you think of the people in the Ukraine that have lost, and this is nothing new to human history, it's gone on as long as I can remember, and as far back as history goes that I have seen, wars have always been in place. I don't care what the culture is. They've always been there. So you have no structure. You don't have a home. You do not have a place where you know you're going to get food. You have no water available. You don't have structure. What's the first thing that is done by the rescue agencies? Let's get you shelter, if it's a pup tent, whatever it takes. Let's make sure that you're going to have food and that you're going to be feeling safe. That's the first thing you want to do. And I think even as a counselor, people want to know they feel safe. They want to feel safe.
And the trust builds from there, doesn't it? Because
Oh,
I feel
yes.
safe in this environment that, I can really share some things and trust that you're okay with that. You're not going to, go in another direction with it. But absolutely,
So
very
it's all
basic too,
structure.
right?
Yes.
Safety, yeah.
It's structure. That is why structure is so important. And if any of us look at what we have in our homes, in whatever our lifestyle is, I don't care if somebody's living out of a car. They're going to have some kind of a structure. I had a woman talk to me about a situation with homeless in Tacoma. And she said, there is this woman. It's very obvious she has mental health issues. She lives in her car. This woman said, I don't even know how she can find enough space where she can even drive the car. That's her house. But she knows where everything is. So she has created a structure of support for herself.
Yeah.
Now, we may look at it and say, don't you want an apartment? Don't you want to be here, there? You don't? Nope, she's not interested. She has a structure. Now, I'm not speaking about all homeless people. I'm talking about this one specific situation. But she has a structure. And as much as people don't want to acknowledge that, we all have it. In our own way, we all have it.
So finding that what works for you, so important, isn't it? Definitely. Well, I, would like to visit this same topic maybe in another show, but if
You never know.
yeah,
You never know.
there's
And
a lot out there.
oh, yes. Oh,
sure.
yes. And to me, I think it's good having conversation because when you do have conversation and you can share concepts and ideas, you never know when or where that's going to be able to benefit someone else. And I think that we have so many opportunities to interact with different environments that when we can do that and we can share that and we know we can be safe, that's worth its weight in platinum. Not gold, but
Yeah,
platinum.
yeah.
Maybe I should say lithium.
Whatever the top dog is these
That's
days,
right.
For
Whatever
elements.
works.
Yep. For
Whatever
Sure.
works.
Well, thank you, Donna. This has been delightful, and really appreciate your
It's
sharing.
my
as you
pleasure.
have. Yeah.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Look forward to our further discussions
All
at
right.
another
Who
time.
knows?
And thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next show. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.